Good afternoon, Dr. Randy, and welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, these are getting to be more and more enjoyable. This podcast today,
Mm.
it comes from an article I posted about 4 years ago, and this article had 700,000 reads
Wow.
because I think it put two things together that people had not put together before that made total and absolute sense. So we know that infidelity is one of the biggest blows to any relationship. There's a lot of factors involved. How long had it been going on? Things like that. Was the person betrayal? There's a lot of factors, but it leaves people on the other end disheveled. So I was doing a lot of work with post-traumatic stress syndrome with different people who had gone through either PTSD, which is chronic abuse as a child, and their brains don't develop normally, or they had had one horrible event happen, like a rape or a car accident or something like that. But I was very fascinated with the field as it was developing several years ago and really developing. And now they're using psychedelics, thank God, and making some breakthroughs. But I was very fascinated with the field. So I did read a lot about it as it was beginning to come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, as I was looking at the symptoms of PTSD, that my people, male or female, mostly female, but there are males going through being the victim of infidelity, were exhibiting the exact same symptoms. Now, they didn't have any very good way to deal with PTSD because that's when trauma became on the scene again. Because now we needed people who were skilled in trauma, which we didn't look at 10 or 15 years ago in the same way we are now. But there were not many trauma-based therapists available who lived with people during trauma. So all of a sudden, we're looking at these symptoms, repeated intrusive thoughts. People I know who have been on the other end of fidelity, they can't stop thinking about it. I mean, it's obsessive. It goes around and around. What happened? What happened? What happened? What happened? And they ask thousands of questions because we're going to be talking about people who try to stay together after infidelity. The ones that split, we don't have nearly as much data on, but the people who try to stay together, I have a lot of data on how difficult that is and what role each one has to play, and we'll talk about that. But the intrusive thoughts and the need to continuously express them, very typical of post-traumatic stress disorder. Unstable emotions. They want to scream and yell. They want to break things. They want to cry. They want reassurance. They're just an emotional wreck. They can't quite get a footing. It's like, how could somebody I trusted so much do the utmost betrayal to me with another individual, giving them what was meant for us?
Mm-hmm.
So the third one, people have out-of-body experiences. When the body hurts too badly, one of the only resources we have is to leave it for some period of time. Children who are raped have they don't remember. They have amnesia because they leave their body. People will sometimes do that with substance abuse. They'll start drinking, and PTSD, people will often drink or use drugs because drugs are a vehicle to get out of the body. But the person just can't bear the pain they're experiencing, so they leave and come back and leave and come back. They alternate between being numb, so they don't feel anything, and being crazy, acting out, suspicious, nuts, retaliatory, but numbness and then back and forth. The hypervigilance, very pronounced in post-traumatic stress disorder. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. They become hyper-aware. They're just, is there more data? Was this going on longer? Am I still being lied to? They can't stop. Soldiers who have been in combat will only sit facing the wall in a restaurant because they're ready always. If a car alarm goes off, they're jumping ready to pick up a gun. So there's this hypervigilance, this need to not miss anything, and a desperate need to regain their composure, their self-esteem. They feel humiliated, confused, and disoriented. So those emotions that happen in every person I've ever known on the other end of infidelity, as I said, men or women, are absolute symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And apparently, at least to my knowledge at the time I wrote it, obviously they weren't put together because Why would an article get almost 1 million views? It was like people's eyes were open. I got so many people writing to me and commenting about it. Now this makes sense. Now, but again, they didn't quite know how to treat it. We didn't have many people schooled in trauma. The trauma model was, remember the event and then move on, and remember the event and move on. Well, sometimes remembering the event reinforces it if you move on too quickly. And if you don't move on, you stay stuck in that horrible cycle of being unable to get out of it at all. They feel like such a fool. Why did I ever believe in love? How can I believe in love again? It's a terrible experience. So there are some emerging issues that come with becoming aware that you've been betrayed. And they all have an effect on how that person recuperates. And then we're going to talk about what is the role of the betrayer who wants to come back. What is the role of the betrayed in helping that healing to occur? Because we were working at the time pretty blindly. The person who's betrayed somebody can't spend the rest of their life on a witness stand. And the person who has been betrayed, who has been betrayed can't spend the rest of their life letting that betrayal affect every single decision they make. So the process of working through it becomes very important, which I'll talk about in a minute. So here are the things that emerge. First of all, oh my God, what if there's a history of trauma in the past? What if you've been betrayed before? What if your father and mother betrayed your other nurturer? And that person became sick or fell apart or had an accident or went after that other person with tremendous vengeance? What's in your past? When have you been betrayed before? And how was it dealt with? Did you come through it? Were you okay? Did you get to the other end of it? Not just infidelity, but betrayed by anything. Betrayed by a friend who sold you out. Betrayed by a business partner who may have stolen money. Where in the past have you believed innocently that everything was okay, only to have the rug just absolutely pulled out from underneath you? So a person has to make sure that when you're having a current trauma, it activates all prior traumas. How old were you when it happened? Do you feel that old right now? Were there people there to help you? How did you come through that in your past experiences? You have to separate out prior trauma from what is going on right now. And that's one of the factors that emerges. Another one is the resilience level of the person who's been wounded. There are people when they take a hit, they go down. It is really, really hard for them to come back up again. And it's been that way their whole entire life. They may develop into people who avoid any kind of heartbreak in life because they know that they don't recover quickly. But, that brings back, again, with trauma from childhood, who helped me? Did I stay down because there was nobody around? So in your current trauma, you're looking for support from family and friends. To bring that resiliency back, you need people to help you come back, to hold your hand, to be there, to listen to you cry. If you don't have a natural resilience, you really need to lean on other people. It's absolutely crucial. But that's one of the things that begins to emerge. How are you going to heal from this? What do you need to help you heal from this? Okay, the three, and this is crucially important. How strong was the relationship before this betrayal occurred? People think, well, all relationships sort of dwindle and somebody's not getting enough sex or somebody's not getting enough emotional connection. That's usually men for sex, women for emotional, but not always. But if the relationship was on its way out anyway, if people were fighting all the time, you sort of feel that that's not such a surprise that somebody would find what they needed outside the relationship. Then it becomes the fact that you're not told, you weren't asked in advance, the person didn't have the courage to say, I need to leave you because I'm not happy. So there's a dual relationship that's happening at the same time. So you're looking at what were the warning signs? But sometimes people will have a really quality relationship. And you could be in love with a lot of different people, and a friendship will start at work or something like that, and it will inadvertently slip in, or somebody, like we've talked about before, goes to a reunion and meets up with somebody from their past. So there'll be parallel relationships going on for a little bit. So you really want to know, because a relationship that had strength before is more likely to be able to be moved on and forgiven and worked. But if the relationship was in really bad straits when this infidelity happened, the chances of the people recreating a new life, you can't go back, that would be less accessible to any kind of betrayal, learning to be more open and learning to be more authentic, creating a new relationship. It's much less likely to happen. There's still a lot of unresolved heartache issues in the relationship before the betrayal existed, especially if there's been prior betrayals in that same relationship. People that need to move from island to island would be much better off if they didn't commit to anything, and then fewer people get hurt. The fourth one, which is really startling, some betrayals are with a best friend. Now you have the double betrayal. The person you're with has now brought somebody else into the triangle whom you know. So not only has the person betrayed you that you're in a partnership with, but your best friend has also betrayed you. Those are much more difficult. Also, if there is a relationship going on, very often common friends know about it, but you don't. The sort of maxim, I was the last to know. Now, how do you deal with those people who knew it was going on and didn't tell you? Maybe they didn't want to get involved. Maybe they didn't want to take sides. They were uncomfortable. I once had a situation where 6 people at a table, 5 knew the relationship was going on, but one person didn't. And so you see that table, it's like how awful that is for the people who have to withhold it and support this betrayal because they don't want to get involved.
Right.
That's crucially important. And the last one is, oh my God, how long has it been going on? And this is crucial to whether or not people have a chance. Just as crucial as the relationship being good, all the things I've talked about, just as crucial as trauma. Was it a one-night stand? Was it a long-time affair? Will there be competition in the future? Was this person promised things that now the person coming back to you has to say no? And is that person going to start calling you and giving the two of you a hard time because they feel rejected or stilted? I mean, people who fall in love with people in a current relationship often end up being thrown out, but many of them don't take it very well. And so as a result, they tend to put pressure on this newly forming attempt to make the relationship work again. Mm-hmm. You can't just reject somebody and have them disappear. So, the betrayed partner's ability to heal trauma depends on those resources we've talked about and the other partner's response, especially if they want to try to make it work. So let's talk about what would happen, because as I said a little earlier, if you've done something terrible to someone you love, you want to heal that, but you don't want to spend the rest of your life on a witness stand or in a doghouse, never ever able again to be trusted. Of course, that's going to happen for a while, but you have that permanent. And the person betrayed has to be a participant in healing their own heartbreak, and that depends on a lot of things. So let's kind of look at those. So the role in the partner that betrayed. They must not only feel the pain and the heartbreak of the person they hurt, but they have to be willing to do that forever, or what seems like forever. It's usually a couple of years. Just let that person vomit and vomit and vomit and vomit. And all they can say is, I'm sorry. All they can say is, I'm guilty as accused. All they can say is, if you need to keep bringing this up, I will listen to you and listen to you and listen to you and not invalidate and not defend and not pretend it was okay, and God forbid not blame you. You'd only been more sexual when you've done that. If you're trying to make a relationship work again, you do not blame that person for why you did what you did. Mm-hmm. Also, it's much easier to trust somebody who looks at what they've done as something wrong for them to have done rather than something wrong they did to someone. We've talked about this before in other meetings, but when the person who's the betrayer says, I went against my own integrity, I did something I should never have done. I should never have considered wounding like this. What on earth was wrong with me? That person has to look internal to why he or she risked the joy or the sadness of the wound, and maybe children as well, or family as well. Why would they do that? Why weren't they just brave enough to either face it directly and say, I'm not happy, I've met someone, I don't want to act on it, I'd like to work on a relationship, or just leave the relationship? Why would they, for that period of time, and guess what, that's human, I'm not judging, but why would they risk everything that was important to them because they obviously still wanted to maintain their current relationship. And I hate things like they wanted their cake and eat it too. That so superficializes it. Because usually when a person who still loves his or her wife or husband, they feel horrible while they're doing it. They feel guilty. They feel like they're almost taking a drug. They don't want to stop it, but they know it's wrong. So when they come back, it's really important that they say, I willingly risked wounding the person I love most in the world.
Mhm.
They are prepared to weather that anger and pain and retaliation and what seems like endless demands for accountability and details. I'm here. I did this. It's not your fault. You need to tell me how much you're hurting. And I will not try to defend in any way at all. They have to put all their own needs, everything aside, because maybe there were reasons why they strayed. Maybe there was stuff in the relationship that ultimately is also the responsibility of the person they left. But right now, no. Until that person has been able to cleanse some of this incredibly painful trauma, there is no place for asking them, well, but you could have done differently. Maybe if you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have done this. That's completely inappropriate. It never works. There will become a time once the healing has begun, and hopefully, usually under the auspices of a quality trauma-trained therapist, not just a couples therapist, but somebody who understands trauma in some way. Once that healing has begun to be established, at that point in time, we're talking about what is the role then of the betrayed partner. And that role is, they know that they have to work through these betrayal experiences, particularly, again, if they've had them before, if they've had them in childhood. They know they have to do some serious work on themselves. How have I become a victim? How have I become martyr? Why didn't I see the signs? How come I believe in something when with blinders on? They have to be able to do some personal work on who were they before they were abandoned in some way. They have a responsibility to understand how their partner felt on the other end of them before they did that. That is not an excuse or support in any way whatsoever, but they need to understand that their partner had feelings, thoughts, sorrows, conflicts prior to this happening. And why did I not pick up on them? Why did their partners not tell them about them? What broke down in their communication that they couldn't have shared that with each other? Why not? What happened? Where was I when that was going on? But again, I want to stress this work of the person who's betrayed comes later. But it has to happen as well, because only one person can heal. Both people have to heal, and both people have to be accountable. This is a really important time to seek outside support. With trusted people who will tell you, listen, we watched you and your husband or wife or partner together. We saw some things happening on your end as well, but we saw you disregard them. We're going to tell you now what we saw and what we think to build a new relationship, you're going to behave differently as well. It's not just the person who betrayed you, but you're going to have to behave differently as well. One very important thing is sometimes a person can be mad at a lot of things in a relationship, but they can't pinpoint them and they don't have enough power to correct them. Give them this sort of righteous reason for rage. And the person who has been betrayed will then include everything else they're mad at in the package that they now want from the person who betrayed them. It's unfair because they have a real reason now. They have a platform. So now they're going to try to get in the new process. They're going to try to get everything satisfied. That doesn't work. It can't work. Those are separate issues and they have to be dealt with separately. So you have to sometimes say to people, don't use your legitimate rage to include all these other things you're also mad at because you have a righteous reason to be hurt and angry at this. As I said, they have to revisit the earlier trauma and they have to eventually be able to own whatever they felt or did that might have in any way contributed to the loss of connection that precedes something like this happening. So, the past relationship is over. There's no going back. You can't do that. No matter how hard you try, you can't undo what has happened. people have to be able to recreate a new relationship, as I said earlier, that's not as susceptible to any kind of betrayal. They have to go forward. And they have to both realize it's not a quick fix. When you have this happen, you are not going to get over this. Sometimes people will go like 2 or 3 months in therapy. Well, everything's better. No, it isn't. A large percentage of people, up to 80%, come back together after betrayal. It's never the same. If you don't work that out, if you don't put in the work, that 2 years of really finding one another again, then you end up sleeping in separate bedrooms, then you end up in a parallel relationship. Then every single chance the betrayed person gets, they send a dart. No, it just does not work. It will never work. It's not a quick fix, because you have to really go through, how on earth did this happen? If the person who did the betrayal did this and already feels horrendous about themselves, but then why did they let themselves get to that point? It takes time and effort and commitment. And the outcome is going to absolutely depend on the level of that. You want a phoenix to rise from the ashes. You have to burn it down and rebuild. And when I've been able to successfully do that with people, they've come back pretty much 90%. And they've created a new relationship, and they've re-understood. Maybe they made commitments to each other too early. Maybe they married very young, and all of a sudden something happens and they mature and something else becomes important. Lots of reasons can cause this. But you're talking about a recreation, not moving furniture around. And so the people I know, as I said, and I want to stress this, it's possible to heal. And it's possible to not only heal, but have a better relationship than you ever had before. Now, it doesn't mean that pain isn't always going to be a thumbprint next to your computer screen. I mean, something's going to activate it somewhere later or whatever. But it's a thumbprint. And you build your computer screen bigger. So now that computer screen has much more in it. So that doesn't affect it as deeply. So that's what it means to have post-traumatic stress syndrome after a betrayal.
Now, does this also, the PTSD is also, it can be related to other things, right? A combination of different events.
Absolutely.
It
just means that you have been hit with the trauma, hard hit with the trauma, and you're trying desperately to dig yourself out of that heartache. And as you just suggested, there can be overlapping traumas. One gets going, and all of a sudden you begin to deal with others that have, I always tell people, grief is held in the heart, and fear is held in the gut, but power is held below the navel. When people stand and they say, I am powerful enough to change my life, and I'm committed to doing that. People are capable of unbelievable forgiveness when they come from that place.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. It's a great topic. We'll be uploading this week. And is this going to be the same topic that's going to come out to your Psychology Today, or this was a past?
No, this is a past article I wrote. What I do is I write a new article every 2 weeks.
I see.
And then we publish it, and we publish it, and they publish it. And then in between, I've written 261 articles over the past decade for Psychology Today, and 21 million viewers. So there are some that were so powerful and so important. I think I'll just bring those back, because I think that they still exist, and I really want to talk to people about them.
And where can they find more information about your work?
Well, they can get me on Randi Gunther YouTube, or they can write to me at Randi Gunther, all one word, lowercase, Randi with an I, at cox.net. I can give them the direct link. I also have a website on relationshipsactually.org, which lists all 261 articles. So people can actually, and they're sorted by subject. So people can go back and, how do you start dating in a new dating world? How do you deal with a relationship that's broken? I mean, I've talked about pretty much every single thing I can. So when I go back to look at some of those original articles, I'm picking the ones that had huge responses. Because even though an article that has 5,000 or 10,000 responses might apply very, very painfully and perfectly to a smaller group of people, I'm going to start sorting for the ones that appeal to a huge amount of people, because they're going to hit they're going to hit deeply and they're going to affect more people.
Right. Great. Okay. Well, glad to get that information. We'll post it. And thank you, Dr. Andy, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds wonderful. Have a good week, Ryan.